Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere in dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now.
Welcome to the Stoa, the last session of Unsaving the World with Michael Smith. This was a 3-part series, and this is Michael sharing his thoughts with us in dialogue about, unsaving the world, embodiment, metacrisis, all that good stuff. So if you've been here before, or you watched some of the sessions on the YouTube channel, you know the drill. I'll tag in Michael in a moment, and we're roughly here for 90 minutes. And I think that's all I have to say. I'll make some announcements at the end, but Michael, welcome back to the Stoa, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah. So before we jump in, it helps me to have a feel for where y'all are in terms of the background. I have trouble tracking quite this many people, so if you could just pop in the chat a simple yes or no about whether you have been to or seen either of the previous sessions. It gives me a feel for where everybody is. Okay, cool. All right, great. So we have a mix. That's great for me to know. I can account for that. Okay. So the focus for all of these is about grounding our sense of what's even going on. How do we orient to this crazy thing of ourselves and this world? But grounding it in the body, grounding it in a kind of somatic awareness. Today, I'm hoping to go into a bit more of why that is important and how this orients to, how this helps us to orient to this question of doing good without burning out. Okay. But if we go into an intellectual place, there's a way that this becomes very buzzy. So I want to start, as we did in the previous sessions, for those who have been here, by getting somatically aware. Just checking in with the body. So take a deep breath in. Longer breath out. Just take a few moments to notice, what are the sensations of your body? See if you can notice the sensations before putting words to them. Just feel. And then just notice, like, where are some of the clearest sensations in your body? Like right now, I have a lot of chilliness on my ears and in my fingers. Our heater broke this morning, so we're in. We have nice near freezing temperatures in the house. It's a very vivid experience for my skin. I feel a kind of gentle warmth in my stomach. A little bit of agitation at the top of my chest. Okay. It's going from very mechanical sensations, very loud physical sensations, to some of the more subtle ones, but they're still clear. Some of them may be emotional. There may be a sense of excitement or a sense of nervousness or a sense of boredom. Like whatever the sensation is, you can just notice that sense. So try typing into the chat. There's 1 or 2 things that you're noticing about your experience of being grounded in this moment. What is your bodily sensation? Heavy. Yeah. And the sensation of the lips touching. Yeah, that's neat. I don't normally catch that detail. That is a neat thing to pay attention to. A stiff neck, Holding lungs a bit too high, shoulders rolling up. Yeah. Cold feet, ripple energy in chest. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to say all of these. You can read a lot faster than I can say them. Yeah, energy in upper chest, not exactly tight. Yeah, there's the beautiful quality of noticing the difference between sensation and compression. You can feel a lot of energy, but very expansive, very open. Or you can feel very little energy, but still be very tight. So you can actually have those two be independent. Noticing how they relate and how they are in your body at a given moment is really helpful. Resonating with the sound of your voice. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, a fun fact about my own background. My father is a mental health counselor with a specialty in hypnotherapy. He spent years in our house doing over the telephone hypnosis sessions. So I learned how to have a very particular rhythm to my voice. And it's just something I absorbed, and I'll slip into the rhythm sometimes. I try not to intentionally hypnotize people, but sometimes that feels of service to the energy that I'm wanting to share. No, yeah, Nathan mentions, I would definitely say that your voice has been pretty key to this grounding. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to quickly recap a couple of things that I want to make sure that we either refresh or that are get introduced for the new people from the previous session. So these are mental pieces that are available. But throughout this, I think it's really helpful to keep track of what's going on in the body as we do it. Right? If we get into the head and then we start getting lost in thought, we lose track of the entire point. Even if the thoughts are correct, what the thoughts are in service to is not the direction we want to go in. I hope to make this clearer as we go. But for instance, if we start talking about, well, how do we do good? What is the challenge? Where does burnout come from? How do we deal with this? There I made an energetic shift, pouring a little more energy into my mind. So what was the impact on your body? Just from me asking the questions, how did hearing the questions land in your body? Okay. So just tracking this, just noticing this moment to moment, coming back to here and now. So I'd have to go back and review. I didn't think to do that, but if I remember right, in the first session, mostly focused on making that experience lived, really feeling that contrast in moment to moment, noticing when we talk about things like what Daniel Schmachtenberger describes in terms of all of the quirkiness of self-terminating civilizations and how we've got all of these things that we need to attend to, and that if we don't as a civilization figure out what we're doing, then the self-terminating will be very bad. And just noticing, oh, not as an evaluation of the quality of the thinking or the correctness or incorrectness of the content, but rather feeling the impact of the energy behind those thoughts. It has a very direct impact on the somatic experience. And in particular, for me, and I think for a lot of people, but certainly for me, I notice this experience of the energy moving up. It's activation. For me, I particularly feel it in the chest, but I think that's much more particular to me. There's an activation that moves up, energy goes into the head, and I lose track of my body. What I mean by lose track of my body is, for instance, if I remind you that you have feet, is it surprising? Not conceptually surprising, but like, oh, right, I can feel my feet. Oh, right, I have a breath. Oh, right, I have ears. If naming each of these things feels like a startling thing, then what that means is the center of focus is on a kind of mental construct. The mind has slipped into sort of a mental construct, and the mental construct has a barrier that is sort of holding attention away from the somatic presence. Okay. Not to say that that's bad, But it's interesting that we don't notice. Most of the time, we don't notice when this energy shoots up and we're living in a mental world. So that's my attempt to bring in a little bit of what we had in the first session. I'll touch a little bit on the second, but I want to pause there and hear if you have questions or comments at this point. I want to make sure that we're all reasonably within the same page here, not just mentally, but in terms of if you feel a visceral sense of confusion or swimming or grounding or, okay, I've got this. Any of that is actually helpful for me to feel and see. So where are you right now? You can either write it in the comments or just pop up and say a sentence or two about what's going on for you, or if you have a question right now. Okay. And Valeria says it makes sense to me. Stefan's saying, got this, feels good. Awesome. Okay. Nathan Curtis says, I've mentioned this before in the other sessions. These grounding exercises are always good reminders that I need to do this more. And I'm guessing you accidentally hit enter. Okay, grounding in mental, not losing it. Feeling connected to the body as listening to the concepts. Awesome. Some restlessness. Yeah. It occurs to me there's a subtlety going on in me that I feel is important to own, to presence. I'm feeling a little more agitated right now than I have in the previous sessions. I think it's just due to the fact that the house is really cold. So my body feels a little extra unsafe. It's not dramatic, but it's enough that there's a bit of extra energy happening in me, and it's slipping into my mental ego structures a little more readily than it was in the previous two sessions. So I suspect that I'm injecting a little more than was here before. Okay. I don't think that's bad. I don't think it's wrong, but it can be unconscious in me and in others. So just presencing that so that we can track that when it appears. I remember how this feels. I just don't do it enough. Yeah. Yeah, the should thinking and the like need to do this more can be so slippery there, because there's like a desire to get to cultivate some sort of strength, and that's sincere. And then there's also this other extra element that's like, ow. I don't know whether that's what's going on for you, but when I read that statement, that's what happens in me. This, I just don't do it enough. What's wrong with me? Is being able to track that feeling. Oh, so you agree. Okay, cool. Yeah. That just noticing that pain, I think, is incredibly key. Incredibly key. Okay. As mentions, I have to work to stay in the body. Yeah. Working to stay in the body is initially it's there's a lot of conscious effort, and it loops on itself. It loops on itself tremendously. If given a completely different sort of context, there'd be a way to once there's enough grounding, it's possible to get into a lot of things about the feel of the way that evolutionary law applies to the mind and to the development of memetics. So that you can actually feel the way that these sort of, like, why does stuff like shame keep regenerating, even when you mentally recognize and you somatically recognize, oh, I'm beating myself up. How about I just not? Okay, and then you have some breathing room, and then you go, oh, right, and I need to make sure that I do this more. Why don't I do this more? Oops. So this slipperiness, there's a reason for it. There's a very mechanical reason for it that you can learn to feel. And it has nothing to do with whether you are good enough or not. It has purely to do with the fact that a mind that is, a mind that has not reflected your consciousness clearly enough will tend to be in service of a particular type of it's the subtle version of being a breeding ground for a type of bacterium. It's exactly the same mechanisms. It's precisely the same process. Those things will spontaneously evolve and basically try to preserve themselves. You can learn, yeah, parasitic processing, yeah. You learning to feel that, you can start to navigate it differently. Instead of trying to fight with those processes on their terms, you can learn to stand above it. But if that thought creates agitation in the body, like it's something you should do, that means it's the next step, not this step. Right. So the, let's see, there's a longer comment here. I'm aware that of that upward movement of energy. I notice the sensations underneath it, and that there is some fear and anger. Yeah, those are some of the most common energies under there. It's taking an awareness to allow these emotions to live and breathe. Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. Stephen mentions your words feel more like poetry when I stay with the body. Yeah. I'll have an aside to make about that. But this business about fear and anger, getting in touch with those and the underlying flavor of them. There are also some other energies. You're not going to encapsulate it all under fear and anger. For many people, shame is a tremendous energy just under the surface. Okay. And there are many others, but those are some of the big ones: fear, shame, and anger. Learning to feel that cuts right to the core. It cuts right to the core. Oh, sort of a punchline that I can point to, but notice that this is mental. Just doesn't mean it's bad, just tracking, oh, if you get sucked into the mind, you lose track of the energies, and then the energies sort of have you in the background. There's, if you are reacting to these energies and you let them move energy up into your mind, and that drives your thinking. And that thinking includes things about how you're going to save the world, or what you can do, or it's despair about how hard the situation is. Right? But particularly if it has this rescuer energy to it, if it's, I'm going to do something to make sure that we do the best we can. I'm going to work on myself so that we are all okay. I'm going to go out there and help my community so that we have a baseline for dealing with the meta crisis. Even just feeling me, not only hearing, but feeling me talk about that. Can you feel the The basic reason for that is that these kinds of subtle processes, I'll explain in more detail. When I'm talking about subtle, I mean something very precise. But these subtle processes that have something akin to a survival instinct would dissolve if you were aware of how they feed. So it becomes very, very important for their own survival that your attention goes not to the feeding process, but to the result of feeding. On the inside, that feels like we're in too much of an emergency for me to focus on this other stuff. We need to focus on this problem. That's one way it can look. Okay. When the mind has all of these reasons why solving the problem is the important thing to do, and it feels awful, and you try to solve the feeling awful by solving the problem in the mind, it is extremely difficult to find examples of that pattern that is not distraction from truth. That doesn't mean the content of the thoughts are false, but it means that the purpose of the thoughts is to distract you from truth. Professor Peanut, I love that name, says localism in self, not other. Yeah, that's a way to think about it. Yeah, and a lot of this process is embodying the mental understanding in a way that transforms the mental understanding and lets the mental understanding matter. It's not a coincidence, by the way. This is a fun bit of wordplay, but the wordplay actually has a meaningful origin. We talk about mattering, but also material things. We use the word matter for both of them. It has the same root as maternal. Right, Nathan Curtis catches mother. Yeah, it's from the Latin word mater, meaning mother. M-A-T-E-R. And it's a bit of wordplay, but there's a reason for that etymology. It has to do with the only things that matter are to matter is to make a mother, which is to be born. Only that which is born matters. Only that which manifests matters. So the reason that's there's a bunch of philosophy, a bunch of intellectually fun things that we could play with for where all of that stuff comes from. But the essence is, if something remains in your mind and it's not in your body, if it's an idea, and then you try to use that idea to force your body to take certain actions, but the idea isn't lived, then it doesn't matter. Then the question is, what does matter? What is actually manifesting? What is lived through your body? That basic distinction is like the key thing. It's the key source of like seeing that clearly, not as just a concept, but as a concept that is lived. When you live the perception of that distinction, where all of the burnout comes from becomes absolutely crystal clear. Where all of the distraction comes from becomes crystal clear. You stop getting confused by correct ideas. You stop getting distracted by models that make sense. And instead, there's a clear rooting about, oh, this has truth in it, but it is racked with anxiety and with the desperate need to matter by saving others. When you can feel that and you can see it and you can anchor that knowing deeply in your being, then you can clean out the parts that don't make sense. You can live the parts that do, and then what you do can matter. Exactly what that is, well, it gets into the mind very quickly to try to analyze that. So that's why I've been going very slowly throughout all of this to make sure that each piece of this is anchored deeply. Okay. So one other piece I want to bring in. This is a bit that I had focused on in the previous session, is this distinction, and I've been gesturing at it here, between the physical and the subtle. Okay. An easy example of this is when you're listening to music, the sound that you hear from the music and the feel of the beat on your body, that's the physical sensation. That's the physical experience. The subtle experience is the way that the music moves you. The way that rock feels different from hip hop, which feels different from classical. When you're watching the sunset, the seeing of the sunset is the physical process, but the being touched by it, the sense of the beauty moving your heart, that's the subtle level. I'm describing something about lived experience. This works independent of a lot of different beliefs about what is physically, we don't even have a word for this. What is truly real? Like, like this question of are we living in a mechanical physical world? Are we living in a world that is made of consciousness and everything arises from perception? I don't care. Okay? We could be living in flatland. I don't care. There's a lived experience. What I'm talking about is the structure of the experience itself. And this is what I refer to as paradigm independent. If you anchor yourself in the perceptions that are paradigm independent, then you don't have to sort out what's real or not in order to know what's true. Okay. So looking at that, this experience of, oh, in this moment, I'm using mental things when I'm talking about music, because right now we're not playing music. So unless you're listening to music in the background, talking about music is a mental story. But in this moment, the physical sensations, like right now I'm feeling this chill in my fingers, right? And I'm feeling a kind of excitement in my heart. That excitement has a whole bunch of stories, a bunch of mental stories that it feeds, having to do with here I am presenting and I'm talking to people. And am I coming across well? Am I grounded enough? Oh, well, those are judgments. Okay, that's the ego. Oh, wait, no, I'm still talking about it. Right? So all of that kind of energy wants to happen in me, but that's not physical exactly. I'm watching that in real time at the subtle level, happening sort of in my body. And so having that distinction, it's not a clean line. Like, of course, there's a relationship between the sound of the music and the impact of the music, the subtle impact of the music. But being able to recognize that there are some fairly clear instances of, oh, this is physical, this is subtle. Being able to distinguish between them is immensely useful, in large part because what your mind can think about and what your mind can reflect is based on what you have habitually pointed your mind at. Our surrounding culture focuses almost entirely on the physical level and is still influenced by the subtle level. It can talk a little bit about some of the subtle things. When we talk about culture or we talk about beauty, we're talking about the subtle level. But when we when we keep the focus on, oh, well, we need to see this phrasing happen. We need the government to come forward with this policy. We need to clean up our oceans. We need to have people having this kind of conversation. There's a tendency to focus back on what's being said, what are people doing, what are the objects in the physical world, and how are they interacting. It's important to be able to see that, but it's an echo of what happens at the subtle level. How, like, what happens in a marriage, whether a marriage does well and whether people feel good in the context of the marriage, is not about, are you avoiding the physical act of eye rolling? Are you saying things that follow the format of nonviolent communication? Like that's at the mechanical level. It's at the more subtle level of, is there a feeling of openness and respect and a willingness to risk vulnerability? Right? I don't mean to encapsulate the entire thing of what makes for a good long-term relationship, but that level highlights the things that define whether there's eye rolling, whether there's an inclination to use things like nonviolent communication, whether there is condescension happening. Right? So the subtle level controls the physical in spirit. It's sort of like, this is what we mean by in spirit. What is the spirit of the law? What is the subtle level? So learning to notice that influence so that we aren't just bombarded by it, so that we can attend to that and feel it in our bodies, to feel it in the present moment. This is a really valuable piece to be able to reflect on. Okay. Now I'm going somewhere with all of this, right? Because this subtle part of the whole game that we've been playing is that there are enormous subtle influences that our culture systematically ignores, that are controlling the entire arc of what humanity is doing. This is the type of thing that Carl Jung was referring to when he was talking about archetypes. But archetypes are, as people often talk about it, are very conceptual. There's a way to feel moment by moment the thing that Carl Jung was talking about when he's referring to archetypes. You don't have to be a Jungian psychotherapist in order to feel this stuff. You can just feel it. And then you can sort of see, I sometimes sort of tongue-in-cheek refer to what gods are working through you. What gods are working through the communities around you. We don't have to use those metaphors, but these are on the same level as, what is the weather today? This might have some impact on your physical surroundings. And so there are ways of asking that question at the subtle level that are incredibly important for understanding what it means to be able to do good. Not as a theory, but as a direct experience, as something that you can encounter for yourself. Okay. But again, I want to pause there and see, where are you all? What's going on for you? How are you responding somatically, intellectually, if that's important? But track when your energy goes into your mind and you want an answer in a way that's disembodied. It's fine. I'm fine with you asking those kinds of questions, but I'm inviting you to notice, because what we're trying to speak to is a language, a way of being that is beneath the talking of the mind. So you can either put that in the chat or you can pop up to speak if you like. Okay, I had to stand up to do a range of stretch exercises, yeah.
Hi, can I say something?
Yeah, go for it, baby.
I so appreciate your holding of this. And my physical response is that, so I'm new to this. I've never been here and found it recently, and still don't exactly understand where you're going. I still feel quite in this mystical experience of jumping into the unknown or something. But at the same time, I feel a very heart open, magnetic kind of pull towards, I don't know what I call it, truth, or what I call it, a knowing, something that feels very calm. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing it. That is absolutely beautiful, and it's perfect. I can feel the following in what you're saying. I think it's worth explicating to put it in common knowledge here. The business of the mind is confused and the mind is sort of disoriented can be fine. And it's absolutely important when you're learning how to embody a different way of experiencing more and more subtle layers of experience itself. That sometimes the mind is going to be confused because it's going to tend to want to ask, what is the object level thing that this is talking about? But it is talking about the object level. The issue is that the mind is not used to reflecting these levels. So the discomfort and the confusion is that the mind is having to rearrange something like its own, the technical term for this is its ontology. Its sense of what real means tends to be very, it tends to be too dense for the levels that allow the mind to directly reflect truth. I'm feeling that in what you're talking about. I can tell that you're feeling the recognition at a deeper level of, oh, this is talking about truth. And that's the important sense, and getting the mind to reflect that and noticing, oh, that's what I've always been anchored in. That has always been the foundation. Like, that's perfect. It's absolutely beautiful. Right? And the mind will become less confused over time. It just doesn't get to become less confused on its terms. But with all that said, my hope is by the end of this session, I can wrap this up and go, okay, so now in terms of a mechanical mind that's now starting to reflect these more subtle levels, here's what we're talking about. So we also have a comment here, trying to track while listening to you between cognitive processing and physical feeling. Yeah. For me, there's this enormous pipe, this enormous energetic pipe. I assume this is fairly common, but in me it seems to be especially strong. It's been one of my main edges of growth, of noticing how wide the energetic pipe is between my body and my mind. It's like this, if I get a little extra charge, bam, theory land. Right? And it is so fast and so strong, in part because I have a strong mind. It's like, yeah, I'd have nothing to do with it. I was sort of born with it, and I just have this nice tool. It's sitting around, and I get to use it. Like, okay, well, cool. So when I'm scared, I can kind of hide behind it. It can sort of do my life for me. So I think I actually remember when I was about 3 to 5, there was a particular incident where I made the decision that I didn't know I was doing this, but in effect, I said, I'm going to build this pipe. And just feeling that and noticing, oh, okay, I want to be able to use my mind, but I don't want to escape my somatic awareness in order to use my mind. Can I be with the energy and be able to use my mind in a way that serves? That's an ongoing challenge for me. I have gotten much, much better at it. But that's not saying much. Yeah, so it's I find it challenging too. Let's see. Professor Peanut asks, are the best thoughts in grounding after tripping over reality? Are the best thoughts in grounding after tripping over reality? My mind is not successfully parsing what that question means. So if you really want an answer, you're going to have to rephrase. Steph says, here goes. For many years, I've noticed there is a little light in my heart that glows in certain circumstances. And now the energy in my chest has moved there, and inhaling feels like oxygenating it. Perfect. Beautiful. It's always there. I just need to remember it and breathe into it. Yeah. That is beautiful. That's starting to reflect something. Yes.
Michael?
Yeah, Danny. Hi.
It's lovely. You're modeling it. So that's good. I can feel it. You know, in and out. The words that I use, and I would just wanted to see how you feel about them, is channels. That when I'm speaking or I'm listening to somebody, I can be in the mind channel, I can be in the body channel, I can be in the subtle channel, and 3 different perceptions can happen. And that what you're offering here is there is practice that allows all of those channels to be open. And because they often are not saying the same thing, like just the last thing you said about the light, you know, light appearing in my heart. That might be there in something very different than what the particular mental whatever. And we're not trained. We're trained to do, it's like I can feel going from one channel to the other is sort of okay. You know, well, let's just feel this channel. But the actual blending of them, or just allowing them all to be open, to all be here. So,
Yeah.
So how do you feel about my use of that word channels? How does that land?
I love that use of it. It resonates very clearly. I want to make a small adjustment to it, but the net effect, yes, beautiful. Okay. I also want to clarify before I make the adjustment. The thing about the light in the heart, I was quoting somebody who had written here, Steph VM. Yeah.
Yes, I knew that. I just didn't remember the name. So thank you for that. Beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the small adjustment I want to make there is this is not just a matter of switching which channel and then listening to lots of channels. Okay. It's a matter of that there's a reason there are multiple channels. The channels have different purposes, and there is sort of a meta channel that includes all of them, that if you attune to, you can recognize when which channel is useful.
That's good.
Okay. That meta channel, one simple way to point at it is your sense of truth. Truth is not mental. And what lets you know something, like when I have a background as a mathematician, and I'm looking at things like the Pythagorean Theorem. We have a bazillion proofs of the Pythagorean Theorem. We know the Pythagorean Theorem is true, but there's a very subtle but important difference here. What a proof does is show that the thinking involved in the statement, in this case, the thing about the a squared plus b squared equals c squared, if you are careful about a, b, and c for a right triangle. What it says is the words that we're using and the method of reasoning that we've chosen to use is consistent with that conclusion. Okay. So what the mind can do is consistency. It can check consistency. That's what that channel is for. It takes things out of context and then examines it carefully and finds ways to see, is this a consistent system? And then ideally, it puts that answer back in context. But the sense of whether or not the mind has done a good consistency process, or whether what the mind has to say is relevant, That's not the mind. That's you. That's your sense of truth. An easy example of this is when you're trying to think of what was that actor's name in that film? He's like kind of the sleazy guy and was playing this, but he's like an adorable kind of sleazy. What was his name? I can't quite remember it. Did it begin with an F? I think it did. Oh, whatever. It'll come to me later. And then a little bit later, your mind might boom. Tim Curry. It was Tim Curry. And your mind is answering the question, but you know whether the mind is right. The mind will come in and jump in with all of these things of, oh, it's like, was it John Candy? No, mind. I know why you're thinking it's John Candy, but that's not what I'm looking for. Please try again. So there are nuances to get in here when I'm talking about truth and the sense of truth and the fact that you know that the mind is correct. There's something to be careful about here. I'm not saying that you have a magic oracle in your head. I am saying that that whether the mind is answering your question correctly is something you can tell. The same part of you that can tell whether a logical argument makes sense. There's a reason we use that word, makes sense, sensory, the senses. It is grounded in something deeper than the mind. The mind can babble all it wants to, but whether the mind is doing anything useful is something you can tell. So all of this anchoring in the body, part of the reason for that is the body is something that a mind that is focused on the physical level can think about. But if you actually put your attention there, you will start to anchor in truth, because your body is your sense organ for reality. The mind's power is precisely that it can divorce your experience from the rest of reality and do its analysis. That is precisely why it's useful, because it allows you to extend your senses in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you were always embedded in your immediate circumstances. But that means that if you go and you live in thought worlds, you lose track of truth. And you get back there by so long adjustment. I want to emphasize, to me, it is a relatively small one. On net, I love the channels thing. That sounds beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm wanting to move on a little bit because there's a piece here that I want to add. I want to invite you to notice in yourselves. So I started the first session by giving a bit of my own background with trying to save the world. I'm going to try to very quickly recap this. I spent maybe 15 years at the level of passion and effort of an activist. My domains of activism were very strange. For about half that time, I was devoted to ending aging. And it's not a very popular cause. But there you go. I don't want to go into the details of it here, although in another context, I'd be happy to explain why. And then I shifted gears and noticed actually the problem is a step back from dealing with aging. Part of the reasoning being, and this reasoning applies to almost every domain where we try to solve something. The same thing could apply to environmentalism. It could apply to dealing with artificial intelligence. It could apply to dealing with political fragmentation. The reasoning in the case of aging is, well, if we did something like a Manhattan Project as a species to solve the biological problem of aging, I think we would be able to crack it. I don't know how long, but I bet we could. So what that means is there is something like a lack of will. There's something like a kind of lack of coherence around that being an important thing to focus on. Right? Now, you could replace aging here with, oh, if we did a Manhattan Project on actually solving climate change, we would be able to actually solve it. Or if we did a Manhattan Project on dealing with the risk of human extinction through smarter than human artificial intelligence, we would be able to crack it. What's missing is the will. So why is the will missing? Even in cases where it seems extremely clear that there is a common problem, what's going on there? So I spent another 7 years devoted to the project that, and created a company down in California, the Center for Applied Rationality, trying to solve the problem of the human race being too insane to solve its own problems. It seemed to me like that is the meta problem that produces the meta crisis. If we try to solve each of the, even if we were to successfully deal with bioterrorism, or we were to successfully deal with environmental chaos, we would not have dealt with AI. We would not have dealt with political fragmentation. So how do you solve all this? Well, we've got to solve sanity. Okay. Now, spent 7 years in that kind of focus, and I eventually, well, actually, let me pause there, and I want you to reflect: how is my sharing this affecting your body? There's a subtle thing that I'm wanting to point out. It's a subtle energetic thing. So what are you noticing? I see Pam doing this. Okay. Yeah, Steph feels sympathy. Okay. Yeah. Intrigue. Okay, I'm going to claim intrigue is a mental response to the energy. What's the actual sensation? Okay. Shallower breathing. Yeah. Like a slight fight or flight sympathetic nervous system response. Yeah. Funny. Yeah. It's like whether funny is a mental judgment or whether that's the physical sensation of humor. That's something that's something to track. I'll leave that to you to decide. It activates very similar feelings in me, feeling a need to solve big problems, a feeling of need, not intellectual. Beautiful. So maybe it's tension or anxiety. Yeah. Energy goes to the back of my head, and my head feels fizzy. I love that word. I haven't used that word in a long time. My head feels fizzy. I'm going to start using that one. Alertness. Yeah. Anytime you feel more alive, more alert, more active, that means that you are raising energy. This is talking at the subtle level. You are raising energy. This is not just a matter of increasing vibes. That's a different issue depending on which community you're talking to about what a vibe means. But this alertness, aliveness often means sympathetic nervous system activation. In a lot of contexts, this is considered bad. To me, it's not bad, but it does mean if your container is not cultivated to hold that energy, there's a tendency to vent the energy somewhere. For me, the energy vents into the mind. So when I start feeling activated, my mind speeds up. And then I get disconnected from truth. Right? So just noticing, oh, when I'm feeling excitement, alertness, aliveness, this is not a problem. It's just a question of, oh, so you're building energy. What are you doing with it? And someone mentions feeling relief. Okay, cool. All right, so the thing I want to point out here is there is secretly both a disrespect and an anxiety that is living at the subtle level, in order to drive the energy behind the story I just gave. Okay. Here we are having all of these problems, and well, trying to solve each of these issues, I can see why it doesn't make sense. Okay, so that's the mind that's spinning in a mental world. If I'm talking about it in a way that feels disconnected from my body, that means that I'm living in a kind of hallucination. It doesn't make the hallucination wrong, but it means that it's going to tend to drift away from truth. It's not anchored, it's not rooted, it's not mattering. So that's one piece to track. Oh, I'm getting lost in my excitement. You can even hear it when my speech speeds up. Okay. The mind can move faster than the body. So it can be very helpful to notice, oh, with all that aliveness, all that alertness, that energy goes into the mind, and then I can create these worlds, and then we can do this thing, and here's this concept, and we can do this thing. It's sort of like taking this steam engine, or sort of taking the heat in your core, building up the heat of the steam, and the steam shoots into the mind and turns the turbines of a steam engine. And now the steam engine is revving, and thinking that the results of the steam engine are where the power is. But the power is coming from below. That's why it's really important to ground, to notice, what are these thoughts in service of? Okay. So the reason I want to highlight that, I see Danny bringing in this, the feel of impossible, stalling, a numbness, a freezing. Will is then gone. Perfect. So this kind of collapse, this energetic, right? I've experienced this a lot in listening to Daniel Schmachtenberger give his descriptions of why we're screwed, right? There's a beautiful, beautiful analysis. And I mean, absolutely no disrespect to what he's saying or the fact that he's saying it. I'm describing my experiential response. And I'm just grabbing Schmachtenberger because he's an example that's more likely to be common here. I could just as well have grabbed, oh man, I used Nick Bostrom. I could just as well have described Nick Bostrom, who wrote the book Superintelligence, which was a very careful analysis of why artificial intelligence is almost guaranteed to destroy us all. I'm being very glib in that description, but it's a reasonable. If I'm going to oversimplify, I think that's a reasonable oversimplification. So the thing to notice is how that kind of poison, that kind of, right? That's one of many sort of responses of the body recognizing this doesn't fit. Okay? If you look around your room, I am guessing that you are not in the midst of a meta crisis. You are in a room where you are probably physically safe. You're not going to be attacked. Okay. This is true. The mind has to project in order to create problems, and then the body is reacting to these hallucinated problems. The mind is a sense extender, ideally, so maybe you are seeing problems on the horizon, but it doesn't help to have this fight or flight response, which will help you on the time scale of minutes to maybe hours for a problem that's going to take years or decades to solve. It actually just drains you. So what that says is your mind's way of relating to these things is out of sync with the truth of your body. That's what's experienced as exhaustion, defeat, hopelessness. That's what's also experienced as anxiety and desperation. When the answer to that is to dive into the theory harder, you have doubled down on using your body energies to keep yourself locked in a mental fantasy that is draining your body energies and is freaking your body out. What that means is that you're not actually addressing the cause of the energies in the first place. Okay. So I'm going to continue my story in a moment because all of that, if it's clear to you, you'll be able to see why what happened afterwards happened. If I just tell you, it becomes a mental thing, but I want you to feel the resonance of this. So I want to pause here again and check in with you. How is this resonating? How is it misresonating? What's going on for you? Okay. See, Steph mentions part of the exhaustion is a feeling of separateness / alienation when thinking, quote, why don't others care about this as much as me, end quote, which can feel frightening. Yeah. So I want to pick this out in particular. That thought can you feel the energy behind that thought? This sense of how dare they? Why? I mean, there's a bunch of different flavors. There can be a how dare they? Why don't these people get on board? This is sort of like the activist poking energy. Right? Fine, I'll do it myself. Okay? There can also be this, why don't others care the way I do? Poor me. And I want to be clear, I'm not mocking when I say that. I'm highlighting there's an energy here. I'm so victimized by reality. But what you're actually being victimized by is your thoughts about what other people are feeling and thinking. So what that means is the pain that is in that thought. Why don't others care about this as much as me? The pain is actually self-induced. It is not a pain that is about the experience of a surprise in your connection with reality. Like, pain in the body is actually an output of the brain. It is a surprise signal that when your body encounters a feeling that is outside of its model and it needs an emergency mode, it uses pain in order to grab conscious attention. This is why there's such a thing as phantom limb pain, why a limb that is no longer there can hurt. Because it is an output of the brain, it's not an input from the nerves. What's an input from the nerves are the sensations that get labeled as pain. So when something in the world hurts, that is your projection. That doesn't mean that there aren't mechanical effects that would violate things that you care about in the world, but the pain is a matter of your projection. And if your inability to tolerate the pain is also something that you demand the reality outside of you adjust for, then you're going to spend all of your energy living in a fantasy world where you are creating pain for yourself and demanding that everyone and everything else change so that it is in accordance with your model, but also magically your pain stops. But it can't because it's coming from inside you. I see Sahil mentioned mind feels a little bullied right now, to be honest. Yeah, I could be cleaner in how I'm emphasizing this. There's a part of me that wants the world to get this, which is actually an example of the type of energy that I'm talking about. So I find it useful to hear and feel that reflection, catching, oh yeah, I'm actually pushing just a little bit. Okay. I don't claim to have this stuff down perfect. Okay. I've just been working on it, and I have enough mental clarity that I can track this a lot better than average. I see Curtis mentions feeling seen by I'm so victimized by reality. Yeah. Cool. What about the loneliness of seeing something others don't? Yeah. The loneliness itself can be a clear reflection of the heart. Okay, there can be an actual sensation of, and I've experienced this quite a lot, this sense of, like, the things I'm describing now, I have seen very clearly for about 3 years, and I've had some difficulty articulating it in a way that can land for people. And this has been an enormous frustration for me. Okay? But before the frustration is an honest sense of where the pain is coming from is not, I see something others don't. That has a lot of me in it. When there's a lot of me in it, that means my mind's getting involved. The me there is a mental icon. The tenderness, the sourness, and the sense of, oh, I'm seeing something in the world that's true. And I can tell that others aren't seeing this and they are inflicting pain on each other because of it. And I want something different. that's just true. That's a sense of the heart. The place where, and here I'll do the shift, so you feel, this is a subtle sense. And I wish that others would understand what I have to see and say, because then we could get out of all of this trouble, and maybe I could try like helping them and okay, I'm gonna go out and make sure that this voice is heard. Can you feel the painting of shit that just went across the compassion? It was the truth underneath. Okay. That's the subtlety to track. Almost all forms of trying to save the world have nothing to do with the world and everything to do with reinforcing a sense of self that is focused on that layer of paint. This is why activists can be annoying. It has nothing to do with the quality of the cause that they're fighting for. It has everything to do with the fact that they're fighting and the way that they're fighting. Now, minds that are fixated on the level of form are going to tend to say, therefore, the thing we need to do is not fight. But can you feel the subtle violence that that push has? That's the game. I claim that what we're dealing with, the thing that we're calling the meta crisis, is the human race learning at the subtle level the importance that it already learned at the physical level for the most part. It's still trying to sort this out, but there isn't a lot of disagreement that violence and torture, killing and maiming are things that we generally don't want to do to each other. The only reason we do is because we don't know how to stop. But we're not confused about the fact for the most part. Like some people are and some cultures are, but for the most part, the human race has gotten to a point of, war kind of sucks. Like there's not a lot of confusion about that. The people who disagree tend to be those who profit from war. But I think that even those people, if they could profit from war without war causing the maiming and killing, probably would prefer that. There's not a lot of confusion there. But the human race does not yet understand that it has exactly the same choice to make at the subtle level. We haven't learned to pay attention to subtle violence and to care about it. And when we start to get glimmers of it, there's an inclination to use subtle violence to stop subtle violence. So almost all this business of trying to save the world, the sense of burnout is because that the energy is coming from a place that isn't true. So when we're acting from a place that isn't true, when we're alienated from our own source of power, from our own somatic grounding in truth, and our hearts can feel that layer under the paint, and we can recognize there's something wrong. There's something wrong with what I'm doing. There's something wrong with what we're doing. And I don't know what more to do than to keep pushing, but this is not true. That alienation from that deep heart sense, that's where the burnout's coming from. So, invite us all to take a deep breath. Okay. So, I see a comment here. This seems worth touching on in a moment, but I want to ground us a little bit first. What I'm trying to reflect here, trying to invite the mind, each of our minds to reflect here, is how is what I am doing in each moment related to truth? When I'm talking about truth, I'm talking about that immediate sense, that sense of knowing. What is it that matters? What is it that you already know matters? And as to what causes, what mechanical, what physical actions are important to do. There's a way where that question, while it's important, is in the wrong order. The important thing to check, the important focus is, from where is my desire to create action coming from? Where am I coming from? That's the only thing that can matter. There's a way to shape minds to understand how this actually reflects game theory and mathematics and the physics of how the world works and how it is that we relate to even the simple act of moving our bodies. But the actual key, the essence that I want to, that I hope that we can feel here, that starts to light up in you, is where you come from matters more than what you do. If you prioritize where you come from, then what you do can be kind and good without burning out. Or you can continue to flip it. You can continue to come up with a mental model based on what? Well, we're not looking at that. We're not asking where the mental model came from, what the energy was that was feeding it. We're just looking at the model. The model says, these are the things in the world that need to change. So how do I get myself to take the actions that I can see are necessary to make the world better according to this model? Oh, maybe I need to improve my model. That's some of the actions that I need to take. So let me go improve my model. Where's the energy coming from? That's the choice. Do you want to try to focus on the level of effects or on the level of causes? Okay. So let me catch up a little bit on the chat that's being said here. Okay, I want to honor Steph's point. That I'll get to that in a minute. But Stefan mentions this not being you speak of. Is that because many of us are subtly emitting our projections, habitual projections, without being aware of them? It depends. So there's some details to be precise on. The short answer I want to say is yes. I think that's a fine thing to say there. I think maybe projection is kind of a strange concept because projection only looks like projection in retrospect. And on the inside, it looks like seeing reality. And so the mechanical issue is of living in a thought or living in a world of mind. When you create a mental world and you go and you live there, you're already starting to drift away from truth. By truth here, I could just as well use the word reality. What is real? Now, your thoughts are happening in reality. So I mean, in a very important sense, you can never drift away from reality. That doesn't make any sense. But there is an experience on the inside having to do with, well, is the mind clearly reflecting reality? Or is the mind doing a hall of mirrors reflection of itself. When it does the hall of mirrors reflection of itself, it can come up with insights that are very powerful, but it can also come up with ridiculous extensions that have nothing to do with the grounded truth of being. That's the trade-off. That's the whole reason the mind is created, is because it can do these extensions. But what makes you intelligent can also make you stupid. It can make you very intelligently stupid. So this business of focusing on the theory and becoming divorced from truth on the inside feels like you're attending to truth, but what it's actually doing is focusing on consistency instead of reality. So that's what I mean by not being true, when the focus becomes internal consistency rather than, is it true? Okay, so I want to touch on, go back and touch on Steph's point here. Steph mentions, I'd rather someone artlessly and annoyingly try to see and try to prevent harm than not acknowledge or act. But maybe that's coming from an I place. So this is probably the most common pushback I encounter from minds that are just starting to feel the cause or feel the subtle level and starting to reflect it, because there's this lack of clear perception that the subtle causes the physical. There's a very weird mystical way that you could understand what I mean. Like I'm talking about, like as though there's some sort of magical energy flavor that somehow creates the laws of physics. That's not what I mean. The laws of physics themselves are actually very subtle. They're just hard to understand through anything but the mind in how we currently frame them. So what I'm referring to amounts to something like, no, I'm not talking about ignoring the physical world. I'm talking about recognizing the actual chain of cause and effect and ceasing to pretend that you can just make your planes fly without worrying about all that stupid physics stuff. I don't care how important it is for your plane to fly. Focusing on making the plane fly will not address it if you don't reorient and deal with the physics. This is exactly the same thing. How many times have you had the same romantic relationship, just with different people? Right? Or the same problems in your romantic relationships, just with different people. Right? That's not coming from needing to change what you say. It needs to come from a change in how you orient subtly to the relationship. And it needs to be a deep transformation. And until you do that, you're going to keep repeating the same problem. When you can see that, it becomes absurd to try to change what you say instead of changing how you orient. And so I'm not talking about ignoring action. I am saying that action follows naturally from seeing how it relates to the actual causes of things. And because of that, people who double down on this strategy of, well, but we've got to act. Like, I mean, the environment is going crazy, and look at the economic system is collapsing, and we're dealing with this whole meta crisis, and everything is going tits up, and we've got to do something about this. And if we just sit around and philosophize, we're going to die. So because it'll cut off the supply chain. So we need to act. Well, it's not to say that the content of what's being said is false, but where's the energy coming from? The energy is out of sync with the physical reality of what action means right now. Right now, you're in a Zoom call. So what are you going to do with all of that fight or flight energy? Right? What are you going to do with the sense of offense or the sense of desperation? Probably argue with people or shut down emotionally, right? Or rehearse arguments in your head. Okay, I'm not meaning to sweep through all of the energy management techniques people default to, but if that's how you show up in conversation with people, when a topic comes up, then the energy of that conversation controls how you're able to connect or not connect with other people, and what kind of force controls what you say or do. So it doesn't matter if you try to take the actions that make sense in the world to create a better world, because the place you're coming from will keep hamstringing you. But if you address the subtle layer, then your actions can matter in accordance with the energy that you want to bring into the world. So I agree, things are important. Some things are emergencies. And almost nothing we ever encountered, like the people on this call and the people who are likely to be watching the YouTube replay of this call are probably generally not in situations where you're dealing with a physical emergency on the scale of someone is currently breaking into my house and trying to shoot everybody. Which means that most of the fight or flight reactions that we experience from reading about ideas or thinking about them is out of touch with truth. Which doesn't mean you fix the alarm. It means that you ask, where is it coming from? And if we do that, then the actions we take can be clear-minded, clear-hearted, and can come from that place of compassion instead of from the paint. Okay, let's see. So we have, Steph mentioning, and I am a mother, so there's a biological instinct at play. Yeah, when mama bear's cubs are threatened, there's like, that does a thing. Yeah, that is true. And if your cubs are not currently being physically threatened, that continues to highlight something about the relationship between your mind and truth. Okay. Let me see, where is this? There's a lot of comments here. Okay. So Stefan says, so we need to strive to be, wait, did I already do this one? So we need to strive to be continuous manifestors / creators based on the continuous surprise we are confronted, observe childlike in every instance. No. The idea, I see your hand, BB. I'll keep your hand up, but I'll get to you. So the, I say no, not because the content of the words and the thought involved are inaccurate, but because the energy I sense behind it seems to me like it's going in a mental direction. Right? I can feel the mindness of, okay, so what do you mean by strive? And I'm projecting on you here. I'd honor that. But when I read that, the way that the energy moves in my body gives me the impression of, oh, this is a question that the mind has for how the mind should act in order to relate to these energies. Okay, so striving to be a continuous manifestor / creator is based on the continuous surprise. Surprise is a property of the mind's reflection of a bodily reaction to the unexpected. You're always being surprised in some sense. This moment is not one you expected 10 seconds ago. Right? So there's an active freshness of all of reality constantly. What I'm talking about has more to do with recognizing the truth of this, being here. And that being a manifestor or a creator is an identity. It's a structure in the mind. Maybe the thing you mean by that in the mind is the thing that I'm talking about. But I want to be clear that I'm talking about the embodiment, not the mental reflection. Okay? And this business of in every instance, when I read that, I have this sense of almost an anxiety, like, oh God, that's a lot of work. I have to keep trying. Okay, well, that's not the energy I'm talking about. Wrong channel. Okay. So, and I also want to honor, maybe you intended the thing that I'm talking about in trying to ask that question. I'm just trying to be precise based on how I receive your question, what happens in me. This is more in the direction I intend. Okay. Peter, I see you becoming visible. I want to acknowledge that we have, what, 8 minutes left. And you want a bit of time at the end. So I'll aim to give you the last 5-ish minutes here.
I just
But
fine.
sorry, say again.
1 minute on my end would be good.
Okay, cool. Okay, Bibi, do you want to jump in?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. I read a study about chimpanzees and depression, where they wanted to know, sort of where depression is coming from, or what benefit for the tribe depression has. And they realized in another study where they removed the chimpanzees that kind of depression was an alarming system for the whole tribe, because then something really bad happened without the depressed kind of chimpanzees, basically, and the tribe died. And that started triggering alongside with ayahuasca experiences, et cetera, this feeling that the depressed state, the sadness, the fear is also coming from the interconnected relationship with all beings. And so I'm feeling a part of Gaia dying, basically, and experience that pain. I don't know what you have to say about that in regards to what you say. Yeah.
I love you bringing that up, sharing it. I feel my heart touched by you bringing it up here. So I'll share a suspicion, and I hope that the suspicion highlights the direction that is true. I suspect the reason removing depressed chimpanzees creates all of this problem for the tribe is because the depression in the chimpanzees is a reflection of what is true for the current circumstances of the tribe. It's not that depression is an important signal, it's that the depression is true, and by removing the depression, they are removing a true reflection of reality. I think that depression is maladaptive. It is a reflection of encounters with, it's primarily subtle forces. When the subtle forces are beyond the capacity of an entity to handle, one of the energetic responses is to shut down subtle senses. Okay? When you shut down subtle senses and you look at the sunset, all you see is a sunset. You can't feel its beauty. You listen to music and it's just noise. You're living in this world where everything is still and kind of dead, and you're not getting fed by the truth. Your heart can't breathe. That's one example of depression. That's one I've experienced before. So to me, this seems clearly, it's maladaptive the way that lifting too much weight in a gym can be maladaptive. You can tear muscles, you can snap your back. But if you deal with the problem of the gym encouraging people to lift as heavy as they can by removing the people who have broken backs, this creates a problem for the atmosphere of the gym. Right? Because what you're removing, by thinking that you're removing the negative influence, you're treating the negative influence as removable from reality, instead of treating it as a true reflection of a misalignment with truth. In the same way, feeling the pain of Gaia, I really resonate with this. And for me personally, I consider it part of my spiritual duty to develop the capacity, and I have developed a lot of it. I don't get depressed about this anymore. I just feel it. To develop the subtle strength to be able to take in all of that suffering and to feel it as it actually is, without collapsing or exploding or shooting off into my mind or desperately trying to fly off into some kind of fixated action that distracts me from the pain. It's a work, it's subtle work. And it's non-trivial, and I also want to honor that this hurts. Okay, I want to hand the baton over to Peter in a moment. I see a bunch of people asking for future talks or contact. I want to let y'all know I am in the process of building a program that is a container that's meant to go for months to train these skills. It is meant to create a subtle field that you can step into that helps to shape your mind and your subtle body, and also things that are more subtle than subtle, working at the causal level, meaning to encourage a kind of shift and transformation that helps you to ground in these strengths. Okay. So if you are interested in that, I'll be making announcements on this on my Facebook page. You can also reach out to me. My Facebook page, and unfortunately with a name like Michael Smith, it can be tricky to find me. Some people have known me as Valentine. If you also search that, you can access that. But my Facebook page is facebook.com/Morphenius, like Morpheus, but with an extra N in the middle, E-N. book.com/Morphenius. Okay. Whoops, that was a direct message. Let me try that again. Facebook.com/Morphenius. So if you follow me there, you'll catch announcements there. And you can also, for people here, like I don't want to put my email out on YouTube, and I know this is going up on YouTube later, but I just put in the chat my email address. So you're welcome to ping me by email if you like. Okay. I feel like I am here to encourage this to be more alive and present in myself and by proxy in the world as well. So if I can help and encourage that, I would love that. So feel free to reach out to me. And if there are any questions, comments, as a colleague of mine said, questions, comments, or snide remarks that didn't have time to slide in here, feel free to reach out to me about that as well. So thank you, everyone. I will pass the baton over to Peter.
Let's, before I make some closing announcements, let's give a silent round of applause for Michael's three-part series at the Stoa. Thank you for coming, my friend. That, I felt like we were at the actual Stoa, but instead of Zeno, talking, it was Michael Smith giving his embodied wisdom to this digital colonnade. So I quite enjoyed this series. And yeah, before it even started, Michael asked me, like, why Stoicism to me? Like, why do I call myself a Stoic? And people who know me know I don't really hold that label too tightly, but the Epictetus's quote is my favorite. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. And at the Stoa, we've been listening to a bunch of galaxy brain stuff for almost a year now. And the more and more I listen, the more I realize embodiment is a key component to all of this. And so we got a challenge ahead of us at the Stoa because we have a symposium related to the topic of this series. And that is, if you can see the screen, let us maybe make the meta crisis our superordinate goal. We have a lot of people coming in talking about existential risk, the meta crisis. So let's take the spirit of this session to the symposium tomorrow. You can RSVP that to all those events on the website. There's about 6 of them. And then the next event that's coming up, Anna Gatt from Intellect is coming in at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So just about an hour, you can RSVP on the website. So that being said, Michael, everyone, thanks for coming to the Stoa today.